Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I've just realised that our determination to discuss slightly more cheerful matters today than we managed yesterday is going to kick off with the prospect of an imminent nuclear apocalypse. So, smiles on, everybody. We refer, of course, to the junking, the violating yesterday, or the announcement that he intends to violate the treaty signed with Iran and by 5 or 6 other international powers, including, of course, Great Britain, Germany and France, which the orange buffoon who remains resident in the White House has decided to scrap for reasons that appear to be lost upon almost everybody else in the international community except Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli leader. I want to ask a really silly question today. I don't know if anyone listening will be qualified to answer it. That's not a criticism, because I'm not sure I am. But how scared should we be? 0345 6060 973. I think occasionally, because I ordinarily inflict such ludicrously convoluted introductions upon you, although some of you are kind enough to tell me that you enjoy them, I think occasionally it would be nice to start just with a really, really simple question. How scared should we be? It's up to you whether or not we can crack on with that immediately, or whether or not I shall share my confusions and my gropings with you. 5 minutes after 10 is the time. What is the point of international relations if a country like America elects to act entirely independently? And what is the point of an international treaty? So I'm thinking out loud, all right? I'm genuinely not setting up a platform from which I will repel all critics. I'm just suggesting to you that not long ago, in the days before we started deriding experts for short-term political advantage and believing that appearing on television game shows somehow qualified you for high office, you remember, all those years ago, it would probably be fair to say that most of us would trust the International Atomic Energy Agency and the governments of Britain, France and Germany more than we would trust the apparent instincts of Donald Trump. And let's, in terms of diplomacy and international politics, let's call him what he is, a game show host. We just would, wouldn't we? I'm not going completely nuts. Not that long ago, we would have looked at what America is doing and concluded it was a lot more like something that Russia might do. Cocking a snook, if you will, or flicking a finger for younger viewers, to international diplomacy, to an established, codified, formal treaty. Kim Jong-un must be looking at this with a degree of interest, don't you think? A treaty with the American government is not worth the paper that it is written on, he will be rightly concluding. And don't fall for the line that this is pulling out of a deal. This is violating the terms of an international agreement signed by multiple sovereign states. It's important, I also think, to recognise that I think the only way we've got on this side of the world to know whether or not Iran is complying with the terms of the deal, the compliance would involve cessation of nuclear weapons development. You have now the International Atomic Energy Agency, the United Nations nuclear watchdog, has insisted repeatedly that Iran is in compliance with the terms of the 2015 deal. I don't know enough. I met someone yesterday who was genuinely inspirational. I don't know if you've come across him. Sort of a hip-hop artist in one incarnation, but more pertinently for my purposes yesterday, a writer of uncommon scholarship called Akala, whose book is out next week, and you really should buy it. Natives. It looks at the role of class and race over the last sort of 100 years of British life, and this doesn't happen to me very often. Don't giggle, but I felt intellectually intimidated. The scholarship that the man displayed was genuinely incredible, and there were a couple of points as we were talking where he said, I don't know. So I don't know enough about that to have a strong view. And because he was genuinely expert in his understanding of various other issues. It gave a real weight to the admission. I think it's something we could all learn from. We seem to be living in a world now, particularly when you look at Donald Trump, where people think not knowing anything shouldn't be a bar to having very strong opinions that then get acted upon. I mean, Donald Trump's ignorance is spectacular. It's almost an achievement. It's almost performance art. He knows almost nothing about anything. And I suppose you can think of people in this country as well who might fall into that category. They've got an opinion on absolutely blinking everything, a really strong opinion that they think should influence government policy. And yet, when you scratch the surface, it turns out they don't know anything at all. So in the spirit of that encounter, I don't know whether or not we should trust the International Atomic Energy Agency, but I did prefer the world when we just did. I mean, who else are you going to trust on something like this? 9 minutes after 10 is the time. The support for Donald Trump comes from people, arguably, who know even less than he does about the Middle East situation, and also from people that clearly know a lot more than he does about the situation in the Middle East, who are at the top of the Israeli government. But Israeli diplomats and generals were queuing up yesterday to condemn this deal that Benjamin Netanyahu somehow wants. So why does Netanyahu want this? It seems to me there's a proxy war, and I underpin all of this with a very uncharacteristic admission that my knowledge and my understanding is very early in the gestation process, okay? But as I understand it, and I'm blessed or cursed with a brain that always tries to understand stuff rather than necessarily just picking a side and screaming from the sidelines for whatever team I've kind of landed on by accident. Things we could all agree on. Syria does represent a form of proxy war between Iran and Israel, right? I think Yemen does as well. The powers in the region coalesce around one of those two states, but they don't go to war against each other. They promote or support warring factions in conflicts that are not ostensibly between Israel and Iran. Israel does have a nuclear capability, I think, and Iran feels very threatened by Israel, therefore developed its own nuclear capability. This is me just trying to make sense of it. I'm not married to any of these positions, and none of these arguments constitute a bridge I'm prepared to die on, as they say. But Iran would argue, I think, that they feel threatened by Israel's nuclear capabilities and therefore are developing their own for all the reasons that fans of Trident routinely explain to us, that we need a nuclear deterrent. Because if your enemy has got a nuclear weapon and you haven't, there's not a lot to stop them using it. Ergo, I think the argument would go, would it? Israel started developing nuclear weapons, something that the hardline Iranians are very much in favour of. Rouhani, the Iranian leader, oddly, was one of the moderates that Ronald Reagan was keen to promote within Iran during what became known as the Iran-Contra scandal, when they were actually supporting and arming, what do you call them, opposition forces? A kind of more moderate path than the Ayatollahs would take the country down. And Rouhani's appointment or achievement of high office in many ways could have been seen as a, I think, and I'm going to keep reminding you that I'm very much learning this on the hoof. Rouhani's elevation to high office could very much be seen as a validation of Ronald Reagan's foreign policy from 30-odd years ago. I don't think, and I appreciate some people are comfortable with the idea of a self-confessed sex pest, multiple bankrupt white supremacist being in the White House. We're not having that argument today, but I think even you would agree, if you are a sort of Nazi sympathising rapist apologist, I think even you would agree that Donald Trump probably doesn't understand the finer details of Ronald Reagan's foreign policy with regard to Iran. So where has the decision come from to violate this treaty? Well, history would suggest, and by that I mean the 2 years, if you like, of presidency that we've seen so far, or thereabouts, including the campaigning, history would suggest that he does stuff because someone wants him to, and in the long term there'll be something in it for him. Whether it's Putin pulling his strings or somebody else, I do not know. I would really like people who are much cleverer and more knowledgeable than me to ring in and say, this is no big deal. But I've already heard elsewhere this morning, lots of people who are more knowledgeable than me explain that this is a really big deal. A really, really big deal. In 1992, Benjamin Netanyahu claimed that Iran was 3 to 5 years away from having a nuclear weapon. In 1995, he claimed that Iran was 3 to 5 years away from having a nuclear weapon. And today, they still don't have a nuclear weapon. The presentation that he gave last week, which claimed to demonstrate that Iran was in breach of the treaty, was widely considered to refer to out-of-date, pre-treaty evidence and information. And I say again, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is the United Nations nuclear watchdog, and I think is pretty much all we have as a supranational body to police such matters, has enjoyed full access and repeatedly insisted that Iran is in compliance with the terms of the 2015 deal. I also, as I prepare to throw open the phone lines, have to acknowledge that in terms of Middle Eastern politics, particularly where Israel is involved, people listening to this programme will have dedicated much of their lives to supporting a position and will probably know a lot more about it than I do. I'm here today to learn from you, not necessarily to debate with you, but equally to acknowledge that the full weight of the international community, minus a profoundly odd president of America, is on one side of this argument. And I don't think it's beyond the wit of man to recognise that until relatively recently, until ludicrous division and ludicrous kind of race baiting and scaremongering and distraction tactics and projection. You look through Donald Trump's Twitter feed and there's barely anything he's ever done since becoming president that he didn't swear blind he believed the polar opposite of when Barack Obama was in the White House. The man is not normal by any measure of that word. And I think we can all agree that not long ago, the idea that someone like him might have a better grasp of the facts than the leaders of Germany, Britain, France, China and Russia are signatories to this deal as well. And the International Atomic Energy Agency insists that the country Iran is in compliance with the terms of that deal. So Occam's razor, looking at the simplest possible explanation, Occam's razor suggests to me, and I really hope this is wrong, that Donald Trump has just done this because Barack Obama made it. That's the only reason why he's blown it up. It fits with his psychology, it fits with his past behaviour, it fits with his prejudices, it fits with his worldview, it fits with everything that we've learnt about him since he made the move from game show host to putative politician. He just hates it. He hates the idea that a black guy was president, and he hates the idea that a black guy was more popular than him, and he hates the idea that a black guy appeared to achieve something pretty substantive in the Middle East, and so when he got the opportunity to burn it down, he did. That is not a conclusion I want to be holding at 11 o'clock this morning. 0345 6060 973. I make no apology for asking such a simplistic question. We're living in very simplistic times. How scared should we be at Donald Trump's decision to violate the Iranian nuclear deal signed in 2015 and widely regarded as imperfect but profoundly important to world peace? David is in Clapham. David, what would you like to say?
I think I'd be particularly scared if I was in Tehran or possibly Tel Aviv, because I think that this is Trump saying and Netanyahu saying they want, one way or another, regime change.
Go on.
Because, you know, right on Israel's border, you've got Lebanon with Hezbollah, and then you've got Syria with which is about to be regained by Assad, who's backed by Iran, and there's Iranian troops there. And it's Netanyahu's paranoia that Iran may want to go further and take him on, which there's no evidence of.
Well, he has been claiming, I didn't know this, he's been claiming since, I mean, there's evidence on the record of Benjamin Netanyahu claiming that Iran was hiding nuclear weapons that goes back to 1990. So That's nearly 30 years he's been claiming this without there being any proof of it.
Yeah, that's correct. There's no all that stuff. He brought out all those files the other day. Apparently, there was nothing new in it that no one didn't know.
Does Donald Trump know what he's doing?
No. That's the sad. That's the dangerous thing. That's why we should feel more dangerous, because I don't think they do. How can they know the future?
Well, none of us know the future.
They're putting Rouhani in a corner. He's either going to have another once the sanctions hit and everyone becomes poor in Iran. He's either going to be hit from inside by another small revolution of some sort, or he's got to punch his way out of that corner. And if he's got to punch his way out, that requires some kind of military action. And if there's a military action, it gives Netanyahu the opportunity to press the big button and get.
Well, why then? Some other Arab nations have welcomed the announcement. It's not just Israel in the Middle East. Why would they be pleased about this?
Well, because you've got the old Sunni-Shia war going on right next door with Saudi Arabia, as you mentioned earlier in your introduction. You know, it involves Yemen to a certain extent as well, because you can see that Saudi Arabia is more or less an ally of Israel these days.
And why has Benjamin Netanyahu flown to Moscow this morning? I believe he has. I'll correct that if I'm wrong.
Well, to see what Putin's position is going to be. Will he come in and back Iran if there was some kind of war or a regime change? What's Putin going to do? None of us know the answer to that.
Yeah, well, whatever best protects his position and allows him to keep his hands on all the filthy lucre that he's stolen from the Russian people. I think we can answer that. What we don't know is what that would be in the context of a Middle Eastern escalation. So I've gone all in on simplistic today, so we may as well take it to the wire. On a scale of 1 to 10, how scared should we be?
Well, I don't know. I think we should be about 7.5 out of 10 scared.
That is our starter for 10. 23 after 10. David, thank you. Mika is in Hendon. Mika, what do you think?
Hi, good morning, James. I think that actually we should be a lot less scared than we would be in 10 years' time had the US not pulled out of the deal, because under the terms of the deal, Iran could quite simply just wait it out and then legitimately build a nuclear weapon when the deal expires in 15 years.
What do you mean by legitimate? What do you mean by legitimately?
Well, legitimately, as in they would be in compliance with the deal. They would not be, contravening anything by.
So then, abandoning the deal, in your words, abandoning the deal means they can legitimately build a nuclear weapon now.
Well, first of all, there's a difference between building a nuclear weapon and enriching uranium. But they.
I was quoting your own words back to you.
Yeah. But yes, they can.
So this is good. It's good that they can now legitimately develop a nuclear weapon, because if the deal had stayed in place, they wouldn't have been able to do that for 15 years.
Okay, they have been denying that they have a nuclear weapons program, and
no, they didn't deny they had a nuclear weapons program. They did. Well, the terms of the deal were that they'd stop enriching uranium, which could be part of a nuclear weapons program.
No. Under the terms of the deal, part of the terms of the deal was that they would come clean and declare any previous nuclear weapons activity that they had engaged in, and they are in breach of that.
Are you sure? As I said at the outset, this is new for me. But why then are the?
You can go.
I will, but just answer me this: why are the IAEA insisting that Iran is in complete compliance with the terms of the deal?
Because the IAEA is dealing with inspections, not with the legal question of whether or not it has complied with declarations.
Well, how do you establish that without inspections? Surely inspections are the only way you can.
Well, no, two things. First of all, if we're talking about historical development, the intelligence that Israel presented last week is evidence of a historical nuclear weapons program.
Well, it was described by the former IAEA nuclear weapons inspector Robert Kelly as dishonest, completely childish, and trying to make something very important out of something that's not important at all.
Well, he may say that, but at the end,
and he is a former nuclear weapons inspector.
Yeah, but Iran has been declaring that it has never had any interest in developing a nuclear weapons program. No interest whatsoever.
And I don't know if we're going down a bit of a rabbit hole, because, I mean, this is a former nuclear weapons inspector, and you are... I'm just a phone-in host, and you're just a caller to a phone-in show. I don't know that... I mean, in that triangulation there of people who know what they're talking about, I think probably all three of us would agree that the man that used to be a nuclear weapons inspector for the International Atomic Energy Agency is probably the bloke who knows most about what he's talking, no?
Well, it's one of those things.
No?
Where
Okay, fair enough.
Well, that's an appeal to authority, James. I mean, we can always...
and that's where we began the conversation, isn't it? By saying, where is the authority here?
Okay.
And the terms of the treaty that we're discussing, all of the authority lies, in terms of compliance and inspections, with the International Atomic Energy Agency. But let's go back to your original point, which was that this is good because if we left... hang on.
That you made. Sorry,
we're not going down a rabbit hole here. I want to go back to the point you started with, because I don't think we can come to agreement on who knows more about Iran's nuclear capability, the people that inspect nuclear weapons, or you in Hendon. So let's go back to the claim that 15 years hence they would legitimately be able to develop a nuclear weapon, and therefore pulling out of the treaty now is a good move because it means they can legitimately develop a nuclear weapon tomorrow. How is that good news?
Well, again, what I would say is we're talking about uranium enrichment. They can legally enrich uranium.
As of now.
Well, as of now...
and that's a good thing, because otherwise they wouldn't have been able to do it for 15 years.
If they withdraw from the treaty, yeah, they can enrich uranium. But, countries may not want them to do that, and then the sanctions that will be applied to them as a result of that, will hopefully force them back to the table.
I don't understand what you mean now.
You made, James.
No, because I don't understand this. People who think they do understand it are ringing in today. I don't understand what you just said either. So, I mean, clearly you stated that this is good news because if the treaty had stayed in place, then in 15 years' time they could enrich uranium. So scrapping the treaty means that they can, to use your words, legitimately enrich uranium almost immediately. How can that be good?
So they can do that because at the end of the day, that's going to come with a consequence, which is basically reimposed sanctions.
But the sanctions are being reimposed while they haven't been enriching uranium, Micah. That's the whole point, isn't it?
I know, but sorry, you're saying they haven't been enriching uranium.
Well, I don't know. I'm saying that's what the International Atomic Energy Agency say. Yeah.
Yes. Fine, and let's go with that that they have been in compliance with that aspect of it. But the point
all
is
aspects.
That they have gotten, well, not the
no compliance with all terms of the 2015 deal.
Okay.
So just to précis what you've rung in to tell us, we should be pleased that they can enrich uranium legitimately 15 years sooner than they could have done if the treaty had stayed in place.
Not at all. We should be pleased that now we can basically put sanctions on Iran and stop them from developing their ballistic missile program, which is a weapons delivery system for those nuclear weapons.
But all weapons, all delivery systems are ballistic. All missiles are ballistic.
Well, yes, they are, but that's a red herring because
it's your word. You used the word.
There's a big difference between developing a nuclear bomb and being able to put it on the end of a missile and deliver it. At today's technology, they can't do that. They don't have the technology today to be able to do that.
So why has Netanyahu been claiming since 1990 that they already had that capability?
What he has been claiming is that there was a nuclear weapons program. Okay, again, there's a difference between...
No, he claimed it. He's been claiming since 1990 that they were lying about their capabilities.
Which is clearly true, as we've seen from the evidence presented. Well, James, did you not see that evidence that was presented last week?
Yes, the evidence that was described by a former nuclear weapons inspector is completely childish and trying to make something very important out of something that's not important at all. And also, you need to remember that the British, French and German governments all saw that as well and arrived at different conclusions from yours. So again, final time, why is it good news that there would have been a 15-year break on the development or the enrichment of uranium, and now Donald Trump has taken that break off? It's good news because
it forces Iran to come back to the negotiating table with the threat of increased sanctions.
Increased sanctions? But the sanctions go back into place as of today. Donald Trump described them as...
there's a 90-day... There's a 90-day...
They move back onto the table as of today, and Donald Trump has said that this is the highest level of sanctions we can impose. But you think it's good news because we could somehow find an even higher level?
They don't take effect for 90 days, in which time, you've got the European...
In which time a country that's in complete compliance with the terms of the deal will have to prove that it's in complete compliance with it. I think
nothing to do with about proving compliance. It's about the fact that if they want to negotiate a new deal, they've got 90 days to do it. And if they don't do it...
But there's no offer to negotiate a new deal. There's no offer to negotiate a new deal.
Sure there is.
No, there isn't.
Mr.
Trump said there was definitive proof that Iran's claims that its nuclear energy program was only for peaceful purposes was a lie. That is a direct echo of what Israel said. But the International Atomic Energy Agency... Can I ask you a trickier question that you don't have to answer? Sure. It might be unfair, because I am genuinely objective on this. I clearly don't have a dog in any race. You are clearly not remotely objective. You subscribe, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I'm not objective.
No, I know you're not, and I'm not criticising you. If I've been on a journey over the last few years. If I was Jewish, I wouldn't be objective on this at all, and I have no criticism of people who hold your position. But can you just put in a sentence what this has achieved? Why you're celebrating?
Pulling out of the withdrawal of the treaty?
Yes.
Because it...
How does it strengthen Israel?
How does it strengthen Israel? Okay, a number of ways.
No, I just in one sentence, because I'm late for the news.
Sorry. It restricts Iran, which is basically an existential threat to Israel, and has threatened on numerous occasions to annihilate Israel.
Yes, I get that. It's 10:33. And, well, I think even the last caller, Micah, who was in support of Donald Trump violating the Iranian nuclear treaty, didn't necessarily persuade us that we shouldn't be scared, because when he... moved to the end game, which is the perception of Iran as an existential threat to Israel, then evidence and facts don't matter. You simply have that belief and use it as a rationale or a justification for doing whatever you want, including, it would seem, ignoring the work of the United Nations' own nuclear inspectors and relying instead upon decades-old misinformation that Benjamin Netanyahu recycled last week. But, and I really do mean this, I know it sounds odd, but I've wrestled for quite a long time with this curious conflation of criticism of Israel with accusations of anti-Semitism, long before the Labour Party mired itself in a mess as a result of not properly understanding the difference and the distinctions. If I was Jewish, crikey, I interviewed Alf Dubs the other day. He came over on the kinder transport as a kid on his own, sitting in a train. And he doesn't actually subscribe to slavish support for Liquid's foreign policy. But if he did, great, you just would. There is nothing. I don't care about international law. I don't care about what other countries do. Israel is the place we go when they come for us again, and they will come for us again. So there is a suspension. That's why I don't think it was rude, and I don't think he found it offensive when I said to Micah, you can't be objective. I get this now. But it doesn't change the fact that the rest of the world has the right to respond and react and respect international laws. And the international community appears almost unanimous in its condemnation of Donald Trump's decision to violate this treaty. It also, if you were Kim Jong-un, and if there are semblances of logic in that strangely coiffed head of his, you'd also be wondering, how can you trust America when it says that it's going to abide by the terms of a deal and then decides only to do so for 3 years? Ian is in Barnet. Ian, what do you think?
Hi there, James. I've actually got a dog in the race in that my son serves in the Israeli military.
Okay.
So any kind of problems or ructions in that area fills me with fear.
Military escalations, yes,
yeah,
of course.
From a very personal point of view.
God, yes.
And I just wondered if it is actually around the nuclear issue, because the idea that Israel and Iran are going to nuke each other, I think, is fairly remote. But a border war, I think, is far more likely, and that really, really worries me. What occurs to me is that there's quite a lot of Iranian troops in Syria, and also Hezbollah have been greatly emboldened.
Yes.
So I think we're looking at a kind of local issue rather than a international nuclear war, which might put some people's mind at rest, but not mine.
No, I understand.
So I think that this might have something to do with the local geopolitics rather than the nuclear issue. I think the nuclear issue may not be what it's about at all.
How does this, or who does this help then? This decision by Trump to violate the treaty?
Does it? I don't know. I mean,
what do you think it's designed to do under your reading of it? And obviously,
I think
you're hoping. Yeah, go on.
What I'm hoping is it'll send a message to Iran that it's because I think it's actually a proxy. I think I might want to say to you that the proxy war between Israel and Iran, I don't think it's a proxy war between Israel and Iran. I think it's a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And I actually think Israel's the proxy. In the last Lebanon war, I felt it was a proxy war between Shia and Sunni, and Israel is actually not the main player. Israel is actually a proxy in this, which puts a different spin on it, really, because...
With Israel then being sympathetic to the Saudi position as opposed to the Iranian one.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
Yeah, but in the context of Syria and the lesser... Yemen's not really proxy, but in the context of Syria, it is... I mean, if Israel and Saudi are on the same side, they're both proxies, because Saudi is not fighting against Iran any more than Israel is formally and obviously. They're supporting factions that are fighting against each other in Syria. I don't think anyone needs to apologise for not understanding everything on this one. People who think they do understand everything and end up being the ones that fall apart fastest. But I still don't see, apart from that possible escalation of regime change, which could be very, very ugly, and I don't want to scare you with your son being on the ground in Israel. Apart from that, I don't see what the next plan of this is. And I look at Netanyahu's rhetorical history. He's quite... he's a bit of a warmonger, isn't he? He's not exactly shy of putting people like your son in the front line. So what's the next chapter for that position? So you've got Netanyahu and Trump in that corner. You've got most of the rest of the world in the other corner. What is the Netanyahu-Trump corner hoping will happen next?
I mean, I suppose the withdrawal... I don't know. I mean,
I don't, and that's why I got a bit frustrated with Micah, who eventually admitted that he kind of just thinks that this might be a way in which to clip the wings of Iran, but that's frightening.
That sounds right. I mean, that sounds right, and it is frightening. I mean, I do remember Jack Straw, when he was Foreign Secretary, talking about Israel and Iran, saying that he didn't think that Israel was a threat to Iran, and I think that's true. They don't share a border, but
they don't need to, because they'll do their fighting in Syria and in Yemen and in
now they are
arguably in other countries.
Yeah.
I mean, you remind us, Ian, as we discuss this from the kind of perspective of geopolitics and you remind us that for some people it's visceral, for some people it's real, it's family, it's life and love, and I'm glad you rang in today to remind us of that, because you sound as confused as I am, but as you said yourself, you really do have a personal stake in this. So please God, whatever God you pray to, please God, let's not see an escalation of problems. But I think we all feel...
Anything that puts people... Sorry, James. Any move that de-escalates, where people can settle their differences and we take violence out of the situation, I think is a good one. I'm always in favour of that.
Well, that's what I thought we'd done in 2015. That's what it looked like to me.
Yeah, and I do hear a lot of bombast from both sides, and that scares me, because often the people are very keen to put other people's children's lives at risk. And their kids are studying in Oxford and Cambridge and Brown University. So I do think we should, anything that's going to take the heat out of the situation.
Yeah, although it is also, of course, not just the case that Western politicians perhaps are blithe sometimes in their support of conflicts that won't impact upon their own shores. I do think Netanyahu needs to be held to account on his slightly hawkish ambitions, shall we say, as well. But thank you, Ian, and I mean that, also for reminding us that that for some people this is their children that could be fighting the kind of putative war that we're speculating about. It's 10:45. After the break, I'm going to introduce you to the sister of the murdered MP Jo Cox, who has taken up the baton of the Great Get-Together, the annual attempt to sow some sort of community feeling and unity among among the people of this country, who in many perspectives are more divided than they've been in living memory. So I'm looking forward to meeting her, and I'm sure you will be as well. It is 3 years to the day yesterday since Jo Cox was elected as an MP. It was the proudest moment of her professional life, and of course her legacy remains in place. The Great Get-Together, inspired by Jo's memory, who was killed on the 16th of June 2016, takes place this year between the 22nd and the 24th of June, which would in fact have coincided with Jo's 44th birthday. I'm joined by Kim Leadbeater, Jo's sister, to discuss some of what is on the agenda and also some of the movements that have taken place in the ensuing 3 years. And I have to begin, Kim, uncomfortable though it is, by pointing out that this baton has been handed to you as a result of your former brother-in-law stepping down from various charities after being publicly accused of sexual assault. I don't expect you to comment on that. I do want to know whether or not you're finding it enjoyable, easy, satisfying. It's
difficult to say whether I actually enjoy anything in the same way that I used to,
yes,
if I'm honest with you, because when you've been through what we've been through, I just have a sense of numbness that is persistently there and, doesn't so much chance of going. But what I am determined to do is to do as much positive stuff as I can as a result of what's happened to us, partly because that's what Jo would, I feel, want me to do, and partly because that's how we are as a family. But, just to discuss the Brendan situation, Brendan has done the right thing by resigning. That was absolutely the right thing to do, and I'm very clear about that. But what I'm also very clear about is that I have a responsibility to continue the work that has been done by a multitude of people who have picked up the baton in Jo's name since she was murdered, and I will use my power and energy in whatever form that is to continue that work, whether that's looking at issues like loneliness, whether it's working with people on the international issues, which I don't know much about, but I am happy to support through the Department for International Development.
That you know everything.
I don't. I'm not a politician. I don't have to. I'm happy to admit I don't know stuff. So the stuff that's been done since Jo was killed, and it's so important that isn't forgotten. Jo achieved an awful lot in the first 40 years of her life, and would undoubtedly have gone on to achieve a great deal more in the second half of her life. And for me, this has been a wake-up call for the worst possible reasons, that maybe I wasn't doing enough and maybe I should be doing a bit more to think about our communities and think about how you can make a difference.
Is there a sense then, if I understand you correctly, that my big sister's doing the heavy lifting, I don't have to?
I think there was a bit. I think what it was more than that, to be honest, was the public side of it, because I never wanted anyone to know who I was. We were very clear with Jo, look, we'll pick the kids up, we'll take you to the station, we'll lend you money, Dad, again, we'll feed you, we'll clothe you, we'll do all those things behind the scenes. But we've actually, despite being a really sociable family, we're actually very private, so we didn't want that.
Public life is a very intimidating thing, and of course the first thing you wave goodbye to is any sense of control. Yeah, and I am a control freak, so I really struggle with that. I am massively. Ask anybody. So I am, and I find that really hard, but I've had to just accept that's how it is, and just being plunged into worlds that I didn't really even know existed, in terms of things like the criminal justice system, where the police, and then the media, and then politics by default. Yes.
And it's hard, it's hard, but if I feel like I'm actually making a difference and the people around me want us to keep doing this, which they do up in Yorkshire and certainly across the country with things like the Great Get-Together, there seems to be an appetite for something positive to counteract all the crap that's going on in the world, and then I'll keep doing it. And then while I've got the strength to do it, and there might become a day, do you know what, when I think actually today's the day I'm not getting out of bed and I can't do this anymore. And if that happens, I'll have to deal with that, won't I?
Fair enough. It's your prerogative, as you remind us. Tell us then about the Great Get-Together. What's going on this year? We know that it's taking place between the 22nd and the 24th of June, and I know some of the stuff that happened last year. My producer Beth organised 2 events.
Yeah, good on Beth. She's just been telling me.
She's normally very modest.
Yeah, no, good on Beth for shouting about it. No, so we've moved the Great Get-Together. I mean, last year the decision for us was, what the heck do we do on the anniversary of Joe being killed? And we decided to do something that was very Joe.
Yeah.
So this was right, let's have a party, let's bring people together, let's counteract the crap in the world, as I say. And that felt like the right thing to do, and it got us through the weekend. The community where we live picked us up and carried us along that weekend. But what we decided to do this year is move it to what would have been Joe's birthday, because we are clear as a family that we want to concentrate on how Joe lived, not on how she died. So it would have been her birthday on the 22nd of June. So things start then, and we've got lots of schools doing stuff. It's a Friday the 22nd of June. Lots of schools doing things, businesses doing things, and just getting together. And it's really simple stuff. So it might just be having a cup of tea together, a piece of cake, but ideally with people that you wouldn't normally come across. So if, for example, you live in an office block and you literally get your head down, you go into work, you get your head back down, you go home, and you don't speak to people in that office block, you don't speak to other businesses, why don't you arrange a lunch together? Why don't you get a gingham table cover in the car park and sit down and have a piece of cake together? Schools, have a coffee morning. My dad's going to be judging a bake-off that we're having up in Batley. He likes a piece of cake, does my dad. So that's the Friday. And then the Saturday and the Sunday is, again, whatever you want it to be, whatever will work for where you live, because all communities are different. So
and you can find out what is going on, or possibly find the inspiration to organise something yourself at the website, which is very simple, greatgettogether.org.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So if you're an organiser, and we all love an organiser, then organise an event.
Others, I sense.
Yeah. But if you want, if you want to do something, then you do that within your group. But equally, if you want to attend something, if you go on there, we've got this fab interactive map of the UK, and you can see there's little gingham flags where things are taking place, so you can attend something. So I would say to everybody, it's not too late. It's on the 22nd of June, so it's plenty of weeks to come. Arrange something, register it on the website, because if you register it, we will send you stuff electronically, like invitations and posters, so you don't have to do that stuff yourself. We've done it for you. You can advertise your event and then encourage people to attend.
What will your niece and nephew be doing on the day? Do they get involved in this?
I think they will probably spend some time with us. We haven't firmed up a plan yet, but they'll probably spend some time with us. We'll certainly spend time with them as a family the previous weekend.
And how are they getting on?
They're doing really well. They're doing really well. We used to laugh because Joe would always say to me, "Oh, Kim, the first 3 years of a child's life are so important," and I don't have kids, so I was like, "Yeah, whatever, Joe." And actually, you can see in both her children, they have got so much of Joe in them. They're feisty, they're passionate, but also very thoughtful, and they're doing extremely well.
When do you miss her most, Kim?
I think it's fair to say I miss her every day, because there's always something, and that I think Joe would love this, Joe would be laughing about this. I felt it very acutely on my birthday, which was recent, because I reached an age that Joe would never reach, and I found that very, very difficult and very bizarre. And particularly because a couple of years before we had celebrated a big birthday for me, 21 clearly, and Joe was there, and Joe was very much herself that weekend. We did 80s fancy dress. I taught a very cheesy 80s aerobics class, and Joe was there at the front dancing along. Leg warmers, yeah, tutus, all that shenanigans, lots of fluorescent stuff. And Joe was there, and she wasn't an MP, she wasn't a wife, she wasn't a mum, she was just my sister Joe. And that weekend was extremely special, and we even did a bit of karaoke, if I remember rightly. So, but what I've learned to do about that weekend is value it in a way that I never thought I'd have to.
Yes.
So yeah, I miss her all the time. And
what was she like growing up? What sort of sister was she? Quiet. She wasn't.
Honestly, people don't believe it. Yeah. No. Joe, I was always the gobby one. Difficult to believe. But Joe was quiet. She was quite shy. But that for me makes what she achieved even more impressive, because she had to work bloody hard at it. She really did have to graft to overcome the shyness. But yeah, she was quiet. But we were really close. So we always had matching outfits and matching bad hairdos and stuff. But actually never cared, because we were best buddies.
I would remind people that you can find out how you can mark this brilliant idea. Greatgettogether.org is the website that you need to go to. Plenty of stuff going on in your area. Otherwise, you can set something up yourself. There's also a partners page where, as Kim just said, you can get help in organising your events. It's an overused word, Kim, isn't it? Legacy. It gets used in all sorts of daft contexts these days, but that's what you're doing.
Yeah, I guess it is, and you're right. It sounds a bit cheesy, doesn't it, in some respects? But that's what it is, and I think for me it is, and I guess, when you hear other people who've had relatives murdered, it is a way of coping. is creating a legacy. That is a way of us coping. I'm under no illusion about that. But also, as I say, for me, particularly because of the route that Jo's career had taken, she would have made a difference in this country. She would have made a difference to an awful lot more lives. And I think that, you know, if whoever is involved in continuing this legacy tries to do the same and just does something positive, then, you know, I guess that is what a legacy, however cheesy it might be, is all about.
I don't think it's cheesy. I think a lot of times it's cheesy, but in this context, it's... Well, what's the opposite of cheesy?
I don't know. Non-cheesy. Cheese-free. I have no idea.
Great stuff. Kim Leadbeater, what a pleasure. It's really lovely to meet you.
Thank you,
and best of luck with everything to do with greattogether.org, which I recommend you go and have a look at now so that you can find out what's going on, as I say, near you, but also perhaps find the inspiration that will prompt you to actually get a little bit more personally involved in this. Oh, I mean, it's the very definition of a good cause. Even Theresa May, of course, spoke in her New Year's message in 2017 about bringing this country together as never before. It is coming up to 11 o'clock. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We may have a little more look at the Iran issue after this, but there are very important issues in front of us as well, including reports that they finally found a cure for baldness.